Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to here. We got to blow out the candles. How's this? Oh, we're having a party. It's Captain Beefheart, Tom Van Vliet's birthday. He would have been 81 today. So naturally, here we go with some beef. No, this is not Beefheart music. It's my music. Well, I'll have a few things to say about Don. One of the greatest men I ever knew. Anyway. Hey, Lulu! Check this new one out. Yes, I know y'all expected me to be playing Beefheart music today. I'm just not in the mood. I just want to celebrate the great man and talk about him and pay tribute to him. God knows I've put enough recorded Beefheart music out in the world, going back to the first project that was devoted to Don's music was Fast and Bulbous, which I co-led with Philip Johnston, great composer, saxophonist, and that was a fine all-instrumental ensemble. We did 2 albums for Cuneiform and toured in Europe. We were at the Frankfurt Jazz Festival. We made it all the way to Prague, as I recall. We sold out in Amsterdam at the BIM House. That was a beautiful project. I'd love to do it. Yeah, and we played at the Zapanali most prominently, sort of after the fact, because Philip moved to Australia. That's where he's been based for some years. So it's not easy to do active ensemble playing and certainly rehearsing. And there's such a geographic disparity among players in the ensemble, obviously. But at almost the same time, I was involved for a couple of years in the Magic Band that was led by John French, who was the longest-serving member of the Beefheart brood, the Beefheart bunch, the Brady bunch, the Beefheart boys. It's funny because Don used to say, I never wanted to have a boys' club. Well, he kind of did, although there was a female member involved in the ensemble for a while, and that was Bruce Fowler's girlfriend. I'm trying to recall her name. Anyway, when Shiny Beast was toured, she was accompanying Bruce on the road. I think her sister played, if I'm not mistaken, with Dan Hicks and his Hot Licks. I'm so sorry that the name escapes me for now, but it will arrive maybe even in this episode, but next time for sure, because I want to fully credit her. But she played Shaker on a couple of numbers, and that's it as far as I can tell. I think Frank Zappa had much more of a diverse gender spectrum, at least for a few years there with Ruth Underwood in the lineup. We tried to get Ruth on the last album. I was specifically asked to contact her. I'd met her when I was hanging out with John when he was doing the Bongo Fury tour. She was part of Frank's group then. And they had an interesting rapport, I have to say. Her affectionate nickname for Don was Beef Meat. Hey, Beef Meat. Well, anyway, you had to be there. What can I say? Like, I've posted a bunch of disparate stuff about Don all day. Started in the very early morning hours. I posted number 3 of a series of sketches he did in my my manager's notebook. It's hard to manage human flesh and blood, of course, but I did the best I could. It was a default position. It was not an office that I sought out, nor was I elected to by anybody other than Don. And that was in the company of my ex-wife, Ling. Only because he said, I don't trust you, anybody else, and I know you guys would be looking out for my best interests, which we were. So Ling and I took over this managerial function, but at the same time, I was drafted to play first a guitar solo piece on Doc at the radar station called Flavor Bud Living, which kind of put me on the map among the cognoscenti, at least, I don't know, the people who would read Musician Magazine or Rolling Stone. I mean, it got cited, Esquire Magazine, in a bunch of places as, outstanding, at least because it sounded like I'd grown some extra fingers to negotiate my way through it. But the best compliment I ever did receive was from the great Lester Bangs, who was a dear friend of Don's, who died while we were midway through recording the last Beefheart album, I Scream for Crow. But Lester had reviewed Trout Mask Replica. He was a big advocate and friend of Don's. And anyway, Lester came over. I had listening sessions going on here. I'm sure I've told these stories before, but what the heck. And yes, I invited pretty much every critic on the scene in New York City to come over during the summer of 1980 to listen to an advance copy of Doc at the radar station, which was coming out in September that year, on Virgin Atlantic, a very short-lived alliance there. So short-lived that about a week after the record came out, Atlantic severed their relation with Virgin, and it kind of disappeared from the shelves in the United States. Yeah, hard cheese, as they say. But anyway, we soldiered on, and we were touring all over the U.S. anyway, in spite of this, and did Saturday Night Live. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, Lester, after hearing Flavor Bud Living and the whole album, said, "I have a question, Gary. Are you playing the top part or the bottom part of that piece?" Which was very flattering, because I thought, well, this guy must have the best ears going, right? So Lester, it's all me, all those parts in real time. And that was just due to the nature of Don's methodology, because often he composed on piano, and he'd be what was called through composing with both hands and all 10 fingers. So then he would hand you a tape and say, learn this on the guitar. So often to be able to repeat, or mimic the action contrapuntally of this performative methodology, you had to do finger picking, which I love anyway. But that is how I got into actively finger picking, which is a hallmark, I'd say, of my own style. So anyway, well, I digress. I worked with this guy for nearly 5 years, and I came into it actually just as a fan. When I first heard the name Beefheart, I can tell you exactly where I was. I was still in high school, and I was strolling along Marshall Street, which was the hippie haven central strip, with a grassy knoll where all the hippies would meet, and we'd go up there in high school to, cop lids, get nickel bags of marijuana. That's what we were into. Try and scrape together $5, if you can imagine, to try and seek out weed. I mean, those days are long gone, I would say. I don't particularly indulge. I don't indulge at all anymore, not for some years, but that's just me. Chacun son goût, each to his own taste. But anyway, so I was spotted one day up there, and I was clutching the Moves, first album under my arm. The Move is one of my favorite bands, great English band that never really got their due in America. They had some bad luck situations where they didn't get a release for a couple of years after, the first lineup had come and went, and eventually they did get a double out on A&M Records. But I was well into them, having heard them on WBCN, a fantastic freeform radio station out of Boston that I listened to extensively in the summer of '67 and '68 when I was up at Andover Summer School. That's another story, but I used to, there was a lights out situation there at 9:30 every night, but I would clutch my transistor radio, tuned in. I had an FM band on it, and listening to all the great new music that was just pouring out of creators, as they call them now, all over the world. Well, primarily England and the U.S. is what you heard. Some amazing albums. That was such a fecund period for music, and it was maybe just a little bit LSD driven. We could debate that. I have my own pet theories, but for sure, if you check the Beatles in 1963 or '62, and then see what they're up to 5 years later, and you wonder where there was this amazing quantum leap in not just the sound, but ideas in general, and a stretching of musical formats and experimentation. You could probably chalk it up to extensive experimentation with LSD. But again, I am no advocate, and I don't urge anybody to do anything. As Lou Reed once said to me, you can't tell anybody anything. I'm just relating, my perspective on it. So take that with a grain of salt. In any case, this kid who had the longest hair I'd ever seen, named Fred Perry, approached me and said, "You know the Move? I love the Move." So we started talking. It turned out I called him. He had a great radio show with a guy named Harold Feigenbaum on WAER, which was Syracuse University's radio station, and I was an avid follower. And he himself was holding a guitar, an acoustic guitar case, emblazoned on which in red magic marker it said Captain Beefheart and his magic band. That was the original title of the band. The Magic Band came in under protest, I think, by John a few years into it, but or the band, I guess. They didn't like the proprietary nature of his Magic Band. Anyway, so I said, who's that? What's that? I'd never heard of him. He said, oh, that's a band my brother just produced out in L.A. So we went off and to smoke some weed. What else? But in the middle of that experience, something clicked, and I said, wait a second, your name's Fred Perry, your brother's a record producer. Is your brother Richard Perry, who I knew from producing Tiny Tim's first album. Later, he was to go on to do all sorts of great albums with people like Rod Stewart and the Pointer Sisters, blah, blah, and have his own record label, Planet Records. But he said, yeah, it is. So I said, well, I got to check this guy out. But honestly, I never saw a copy of Safe as Milk, the album his brother co-produced with Bob Krasnow, who's a great A&R guy and the first manager of Captain, well, maybe the second manager. Anyway, the guy who enabled him to get into make a record for Buddha Records. And, but when the subsequent album, Strictly Personal, came out, I spotted it right away. And it was kind of pricey. So I waited to see what would happen, and lo and behold, it got, cut out and knocked down to $1.97. I still have a copy on the shelf here. And I listened to it and I liked it, but I was a fan of slicker psychedelia, more produced, such as Traffic, one of my favorite bands, who had Jimmy Miller at the helm, also the Move stuff, a lot of different bands. Anything with Glyn Johns on it would be of interest. So I liked, more studio. This was very raw, even though they did some tricks with the tape and phasing. I guess Don was maybe in on him, even though he tried to put a wedge between the effects and his original intention when the album tanked. But anyway, now I love this record, but it was a little too raw and extreme for my ears, so I was like, oh, I'll listen to it again. I listened to it a couple times, but it was like filing it away for further research, kind of a scene. Now, I went up to start attending Yale University in the fall of '70, and almost immediately an album appeared as soon as I got up there, which was like, oh, I'm leaving one thing out. In the summer of '69, Child Mask came out, Child Mask Replica, and it said on the back, produced by Frank Zappa. I'd seen Frank with the original Mothers in my hometown. I love Zappa, still do. So I got that. Now that one was also very extreme, but a lot slicker in the production. They'd spent a little money. That, new instruments and a different lineup. Everybody had unusual names, courtesy Don. And I listened to it a couple of times, and it really, some of the songs clicked right away, like Ella Guru. And I knew something unusual was going on. At first, some of it sounded like random chaos, and then I realized there was plenty of structure. In fact, almost, maniacal, hierarchical ensemble kind of parts, manicured and perfected with constant rehearsal, as it turns out, with Don sort of presiding over, the production of it, with then a vocal overlay by Don of his, you could say, surrealist poetry, Dadaistic imagery, but really good lyrics. Certainly, above and beyond your typical lyrics of the day, even, among more visionary groups of the time. Really good. And I showed the lyric sheet up at Yale to Jerzy Kosinski, great Polish Jewish writer of such classics as Being There, which was made into a film with Peter Sellers, and The Painted Bird and Steps, he wrote quite a few really vivid, hallucinatory, and imaginative novels. And he glanced through these lyrics pretty fast and then looked up and he said, "This man is a very sophisticated lyricist." So, anyway, well, I got 5 minutes left. I could go on. I've done these tributes to Don in the past. So if you want to hear me playing this music, you can find it. I put most of the stuff on YouTube. And on my website, they may even be flagged, so if you want to go to the specific episodes. The next appearance I'm going to do playing the music of Don Van Vliet is with the great Nona Hendricks, with our ensemble, The World of Captain Beefheart. And that's going to take place sometime somewhere in Brooklyn on the last weekend in April. There's a festival that the Bang on a Can organization is putting on called Long Play Festival, and we've been asked to play there. So we're putting it back together, and that features Jesse Krakow on bass, who's a great bass player who was also in Fast and Bulbous, as was our drummer Richard Dworkin, and then last but not least, Jordan Shapiro, fine keyboards player who has been also in the lineup of Gods and Monsters, and Nona, who's a big Beefheart fan. We have an album out on Knitting Factory you got to check out called The World of Captain Beefheart. But that stemmed out of, I'm going to give a plug to my good friend Co de Kloot here. Now, Co is the Zappa Beefheart guy, go-to guy of the Netherlands. He's a producer and a DJ and a creative catalyst. This is how he refers to himself these days. And I've been friends with him for a long, long time. And he's a stand-up guy. He's brought me in various incarnations. We did a whole thing for Dutch radio some years ago, taking the last interview that he made with Captain Beefheart down over the phone. It's about an hour long, and I set it to music with some input from Co. And that's out there on OK Music digitally. You can hear this and download it. It's called I Have a Cat, which is something Don says referring to his cat, Garland, during the phone conversation. We're pretty proud of that, so check that one out. Anyway, Co did a symphonic Beefheart tribute with the Metropole Orchestra, the 75-piece orchestra, 65 pieces, give or take, who's counting? But a great bunch of guys and gals, and with various singers, some Dutch singers. Jolene Grunberg was one, as I recall, and Yuri Svart, and some other instrumentalists. And I invited Nona to be the principal singer in this. And there's clips of us on YouTube performing this symphonic Beefheart with arrangements by some excellent young Dutch arrangers who sort of studied in the school of Maria Schneider, if you know her work, great jazz arranger based in New York. And anyway, so there was the Magic Band Festival, was World of Captain Beefheart. God, I've done Beefheart symposiums after he died. I'll just leave you with like one last little story, which bears repeating, though I know I've told this before. I was in Havana to play at the Havana Film Festival in 2011. It was my third trip over there to play with a live film score, which I love to do. And I was having dinner at a Paladar, which is a private restaurant that the Cuban government allows to operate with gourmet food and in a home setting. Very unusual and fun. So we finished dinner, me and my buddies, and we went out to drive in my friend's car so I was going to play at the Havana Jazz Festival that night at a club called the One-Eyed Cat in English. And it was an absolutely brilliant night full of stars. I mean, it was just so starry. And I suddenly flashed on one of Don Van Vliet's little Zen-like poems that appears on the back of the Spotlight Kid album. And here, in its totality, it says, "The stars are matter, we're matter, but it doesn't matter." Now, I used this in my, when I graduated from Yale in '74, that was my motto. Everybody could select. Everybody was asked to put a quote from, I don't know, Thoreau or Emerson or chose Don Van Vliet there. And I thought to myself, well, what was he trying to say, actually? What does that mean? The stars are matter, we're matter, but it doesn't matter. And I thought that's actually a very comforting thought. It's almost like John Lennon-esque, who, as you may recall, had that song, Instant Karma, whose chorus was, we all shine on, like the moon and the stars and the sun. And I thought that's a very positive imagery. Because, death isn't, death may be, or Santa Claus, as Monte people say, no, death may not be the final word. The body may expire, will expire for sure, the date and time, uncertain, as Rod Serling liked to say. But your spirit will live on after you in various ways. It could be actual vibrations emanating in the world. It could be in what you leave behind. I've got about 50 albums I just counted this week, nearly 50 I put out, and more on the way. Whatever, and also the way you interacted with your friends who survive you in memories of people. So that was a good thought, Well, anyway, I hadn't thought about that for months. The next day, I left Cuba to fly back to New York, and I went via Miami. I think it was actually a flight from Havana to Miami to New York. And when I got to Miami, my cell phone started working again because there's a blockade of U.S. cell phone transmissions in and out of Cuba, still is. And there was a text message from Tanya Wieman, who's my webmaster for years. So, Gary, I thought you should know, maybe you've already heard, but Don Van Vliet passed away early this morning. So I was taken aback. I thought, this is more than a coincidence. I felt like Don was giving me a little wave on the way out, in his journey to the outer region. So on that note, I'm going to leave you for now. And thank you all for tuning in and celebrating Don's, what would have been his 81st birthday today. And I'll be back here on Tuesday, like I'll play for you every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 3 p.m. when I'm in town. Thank you for tuning in.